And good morning.
It is Friday already. Happy Friday. I'm Kim Spillers.
And I'm Frank Spillers, and we're Rural Community Solutions, to where we help communities and organizations design family-friendly, youth-centered places that attract the people that they want. So today we're going to be talking about how do you design a process that creates the environment to where people want to belong. And that is on a community level, an organizational level, of how do people get that mindset going that other people want to be a part of. So how do you build an entrepreneurial culture? How do you build an entrepreneurial wealth community? Come on back, and we're going to be talking about our 5-institute design process that will help you build community prosperity.
Picture, if you will, the pure, raw prairie. No wires, no fences, no roads, not even a farmhouse. No sign of civilization. This is what a person saw that was crossing the prairie in a wagon more than 170 years ago. They jumped off the wagon, looked around, and declared, "This is where I want to settle and build a town. A great place to live and a great place to raise my family." So they took a risk. They built a house made out of the land, planted food to eat, and cared for the land. Then they wrote back to their friends where they came from and described the great opportunity and promise that they have found. They invited who they knew to join them in their discovery, people they had a relationship with, and so they came, family by family, and those families invited others they knew who they wanted to live with within that community. The communities grew because the needs of the families grew, so entrepreneurs started businesses to meet those community needs. Ice houses, broom factories, general stores, and many other types of sole proprietor entrepreneurial businesses started up within the community. All of our communities across this country, all around the world, were started in this way, with a vision of the future and a plan to grow with people.
Where are we? There we are.
There we are. So what vision do you have for your community? That is what is super important. The people who jumped off the wagon maybe 300-400 years ago and started your community, they had a vision. What is your vision for what your community could be in the future? Look at where it is now, devise a vision for where it could go, and then take those action steps. We call it driving our car. So all this week, we have been talking about different aspects of communities and what you can do in various capacities, foundation and broadband. And today's our wrap-up day. And we're going to be talking about our institutes and what they can do to increase and enhance community prosperity for you.
So at Rural Community Solutions, we do say that where is your community doing and how can you emerge out of the COVID crisis here? And that is to say, okay, how do we engage that broadband or the broad base of people? How do we institute and attract broadband into our community? How do we become broadband ready, which is more than just the infrastructure? It's more than just the fiber to your community. It's accessing the broadband. It's that mindset that you have broadband in your community of how do you utilize that? How do you create entrepreneurs? How do you create a culture of entrepreneurship that will create entrepreneurial wealth within your community? And so we have a process that we want to talk to you about today of how Rural Community Solutions works with regions, works with your community of an identified community region. And the region that we define is where your commuters come from. With your workforce, you have to look at where does your workforce come from within your community, because they don't all live just within your city limits. They come from commuting distance. And so to find that community distance is important because that identifies your region and really your economic region, because you need to keep those communities strong where your workforce lives. And you have to build upon that. So we actually have 4 pillars that we talk about of doing and building community prosperity. And that is build relationships, engagement, entrepreneurs, and collaboration. And when you build all of those processes together, you create unity, trust, and great policy that creates entrepreneurial wealth. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because it's sustainable. It's long-term. It's like the people jumping off that wagon has sustained your community. It's that mindset of how do we create creativity? How do we create that environment to where people can become what they want to become? People can be creative to do what they need to do what they want to do. How do you create a dream community that people can fulfill their dreams? That is a foundation of where you need to build your community and get back to that environment that supports entrepreneurship. And our 5 institutes, as you start to look at that and you start to engage in those institutes, starts to teach you how to create that environment. So what is the 5 institute design process? Well, these design process is a long-term commitment by your community. Now, when I say long-term, this is not going to be a 3-month program. It's not going to be a 3-month process to where you do all this and go, boom, we're there. This is a life-changing, environmental changing, culture changing process. Your culture did not get to where it is in 3 months. Your culture got to where it is in 25 years. So if you look back at 25 years and say, what were we doing 25 years ago that created the culture that we're living in right now? And you will find out that you are probably doing the same things, a lot of the same things right now as you were doing 25 years. And so we have to look at that to know the foundation of where to change. So our first process that we look at is creating your broad-based group that is going to be what we call the collaborative leadership organization. That's the organization that collaborates and has the partnership, the strategic partners in your community that is going to host basically this process. We need a cauldron. We need that filter, that funnel to put the processes through to the members of your community. And we mean all members, not specific people, but all members of your community that will engage and help change and transform into the new environment. We start with the Community Prosperity Institute, and that Community Prosperity Institute then talks about and gets your foundation. It really gets you to where you are with quantitative and qualitative research data, interviews, perceptions, where you are. But then it also then takes that data and it comes out with themes. All right. What are your, say, low-hanging fruit that your community then can start focusing on? It also helps you establish a vision. Many communities out there don't know where they're going. They don't know where they want to end up. So they are just doing the day-to-day thought process of we're going to do the next shiny object. It's the word of the day. It could be how do we create a recruitment process? How do we do an existing business program? It all depends upon what's coming at you at that specific time. That is the in process that you want to do. So this process really helps you create that foundation and create a vision to where your community wants to be and who does your community want to attract. Right? That's the Community Prosperity Institute. That is the number one thing that you want to do to create that foundation. Now, the Community Prosperity Institute really only has to happen once because that sets that foundation. But it's also good to maybe do that a couple of times throughout this process so you keep looking at where you are and is your data changing, and are you moving forward? Are you moving that needle to where you want to be?
So what we're doing in the Community Prosperity Institute is we're going to be addressing your culture. Your culture has taken place 25 years ago. And then if you look at that, it's 25 years before that and 25 years before that. So each generation, are you changing your culture? Are you improving your culture? And one of the ways you can look at that is your population growth. If your population is growing, then you should be doing some things right. If you're not growing, then something isn't changing in your culture so that you have new ideas and new excitement. And that is a snapshot that we get from the Community Prosperity Institute.
So you can grow your population, but are you growing it correctly? Are you growing it the way you want to grow? And this is a check to see if you are. Now, after the Community Prosperity Institute, after you know where you're at and the data that you are, we then start to train your community or take your community through a process of how do we create an environment where people get along? How do we unify a community? How do we get everybody on the same page, working towards that vision and talking positively about your community? And I don't just mean a board of directors for your Chamber of Commerce or your economic development organization. I'm talking about all your communities in your region and affecting your coffee shop talk to where it is a positive coffee shop
Place
talk,
to talk.
of where that
place to
is.
talk.
That's our small community leadership process. In that process, we take you through a curriculum. It's a 24-hour class that we do once per year, and we take 25 people through that process, train them how to do this, that will infect other people that they come in contact with. So it's a process, it's a habit form of how do you change your habits in your community to talk about the community that you have. That's true leadership. This isn't a leadership program that takes you to, this is our economic development organization. This is how county government operates. This is how our city councils operate. We touch on that just a little bit so people are familiar with community development, but this is more importantly how humans interact with each other. It's a community leadership. It's community with the emphasis on unity. Community Leadership Institute. That's number one. How do you train your people to get along and create that verbiage, that environment to where they do get along?
It doesn't mean that everybody's going to always agree. We can always keep those distinctions for how we do our approaches. But the important thing is that we collaborate and we get along that way so that we are all rowing the boat in the same direction toward the vision your community sees for its future.
And that brings us to the second institute, and that is the Community Engagement Institute. The reason why we have this is we help your community and we train individuals to help your community talk through issues on a value-based process instead of just talking about the issue. We'll take, when your community has to talk about school closures, school mergers, what person is going to live in our community? How are we going to handle immigration? Why do we have poverty in our community? How do we help why do we have a drugs addiction within our community? Those types of issues that we have to talk through, not just talk about. And we really get down to how do you have a conversation based upon people's value system, not just their position. It is getting to the problem behind the problem. It's how do you talk about those issues that are cultural in your community that you have swept under the rug for years. You know they're there. You know you need to talk about them, but you don't know how to address them. That's the Community Engagement Institute. That really brings people together, and it helps people find common ground to where you can move forward. And common ground is what everybody agrees upon. It's not the majority of people. It's not a majority of opinion. It's not a town hall meeting to where you have your legislators standing up or your rule makers or your government officials saying, this is what we're going to be doing. This is a conversation around those value type of issues that you need to talk about, that you talk through, that gets everybody on the same page, on common ground, on common understanding, to where people are trained to listen more than they talk.
So like the Small Community Leadership Institute, the community engagement, both of these address a community's culture. What have they historically been raised to believe and to support? And is that getting your community where you want it to go? Those are the kinds of things that we look at and we unearth and we help you work through.
Now, let's address the region, because you have identified multi-communities in your region where people are living, and those communities might not get along with each other.
What?
In other words,
Rivalries?
Surprise.
What? In rural America?
In other words, you
Hard to
might not
believe.
like the community that closed your school. You might not like the community that 50 years ago stole the basketball or paid off the referees to win that championship game. We work with communities on a level that they have never gotten along, that if you are from this community, you don't belong in our town, or to some aspect of that. But you need those communities to start working together. You need to address those walls that communities have put up over a lifetime of culture, over a lifetime of the Hatfields and McCoy feuding because they are there. I've worked with communities to where people have had their impression of others because of the environment that they have built, and they have passed that on for 4 generations, about 100 years of generation passing, to where now one generation of people living in that community don't know why they don't get along. It's because it's been passed down from generation to generation, but they don't know why. And so we dig, we find out why, and then once people know why, they can move forward with how do we address that, because now we know why we act the way we do. And that is 100 years of culture, 100 years of information passed down from generation to generation of, we don't like that community because we don't like that community, and it's passed down because one generation didn't like that community, so now this generation doesn't like that community, but nobody knows why. It addresses those types of issues. It also addresses the type of issue of commonality. What do we have in common that we can build upon, that we can move forward as a region? Because we get along better together. We move forward better together. We can build a better economy better together. And that's what it really takes. We can no longer think of our community as a silo. And the Community Builders Institute addresses just that. How do we build a community around multi-communities that address issues, that become familiar with what each other's strengths are, that we can unify as a region and move forward?
Community Builders is absolutely super fun. We have done it in a lot of counties. And in fact, in one 5-county region with whom Frank worked, they created in the course of 3 years, 250 new jobs. So it is a job creator. It is an entrepreneurship booster. And it is super fun to get to know people in other communities. It's a business builder. You find out that you can do business within a very small region rather than going maybe to a metropolitan area to find like supply chain issues. So it is a business builder. It is a morale builder. It is fun, and it is really engaging to build into that vision for your region to be bigger and better together.
Now, all of this is creating an environment to where you support entrepreneurship. It's creating entrepreneurial wealth. And so that's our fifth institute right now, is how do we build entrepreneurs and create that entrepreneurial wealth process? We work with the community to create an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial ecosystem that will help support your entrepreneurs. Now you have to build the mindset first before you can build the financial aspects of how do we address capital? How do we address and get loans to entrepreneurs? How do we build that? This is really building the support mindset of people of your community that will move your community forward. The capital creation is important, but also the supporting and the understanding of what an entrepreneurial wealth building organization is really all about. We also then, in our fifth institute, go into the schools and build an entrepreneurship mindset with your students. This is really important because when your students have the ideas and when your students feel they are involved in your community, they might change their mind on where they want to live after they graduate. They might go on to a four-year institution, but you have created a bond to where they want to come back to the community and live and start their business. So when we go into the schools and we create, what's the perception of your students? How do they feel about the community they are growing up in? And what is the environment? Do they feel like the community accepts them? Do they feel that the community involves them? Do they feel like they belong in that community? That perception issue is important. And getting the ideas of, if they could start a business in their community, what would they like to do? That helps you as a community organization start to build the foundation to support the business idea they might have, but also create a succession plan with other businesses within your community. Because as we know, boomers is the largest generation right now between the millennials and the boomers, but the boomers are retiring in this country. Boomers are retiring at a rate of 10,000 per day. And so your businesses run by boomers have to be monitored and have them and addressed. Do they have a succession plan? Are you going to be keeping that business within your community? Or can you build a succession plan to where a student has an interest in that business and they can take over that business and build a entrepreneurship program bridge that will help them do that?
So in the frame of business succession, what our Community Prosperity Institute and all of the institutes that we apply in a community apply community succession. It's a bigger concept, not just how your individual businesses will succeed from one owner to the next owner and keep those services that we depend on, those businesses, those products that we need in our communities and appreciate. This is how you get your community to succeed from one generation to the next. It's a very big approach, and that's why it's a long-term strategy for you to implement continually. It doesn't ever stop because the community continues to generate generation after generation after generation, and we want it to be better and better in ever-growing circles.
So when you engage in the 5 Institute design process, you are actually committing to changing the environment in your community. As I said before, this is not a 3-month process. This isn't a quick fix for your community. Some of the communities we work with have been doing this process for more than 20 years. All right, they've not the exact design process, but the 20-year process of how we have crafted this process to emulate what successful communities have done over a 20-year period. Now, our design process is about a 3 to 5 year process, right? So this is a train the trainers type of thought process. So the first year is really intense. and we self-emerge. We really emerge into that process to train your people to think alike, train your people to think in the designing a family-friendly, youth-centered place that attracts people. So we really concentrate on who do you want to attract into your community. And then the second year, we start to repeat some of those. In other words, we do another class of leadership. We do another class of the community leadership program. We touch on community engagement, or we start to have community dialogues around those wicked issues because you have people trained in that. And then you get that experience. You start to build the process of how do we talk and how do we build those engagement processes and talk about the wicked issues. Every year you do the community builders process because you bring new people in all the time. You're bringing new people into this process all the time. You're building familiarization with people around the region and building unity around the region with people all the time. So you are filtering in new people in the community builders process. By the third year, you are almost self-sustaining. So we start to back out of the process at the end of the third year to where you are now self-sustaining. And then 4 and 5 years, we just help you with that process of any glitches that you might have. Now, this is a process that we hope that your community will latch onto because your youth will be engaged, your youth will see opportunities in your community, and you will create youth entrepreneurs that will take this generation to the next generation and start changing that culture to where you will have a culture of building a family-friendly, youth-centered place that attracts youth for the rest of the existence of your community. That will grow population, it will reduce your poverty levels, and it'll build a culture in your community that accepts individuals and accepts people.
This is how we build family-friendly, youth-centered places. So if you'd like to get hold of Rural Community Solutions and ask us about your community and what we might be able to do together, we are happy to connect with you. You can reach out to us at frank@ghorizons.com or kim@ghorizons.com. We have lots of videos up that you can get to know us a little bit better. Today's is a great example because this is a completely full overview of what it is that we do for Rural Community Solutions with your communities. And so we're just open to helping rural America grow and thrive. We want you to succeed. We know all of the magic that takes place in rural America, and we get super excited about it.
So if you'd like more information, give us a call, comment on this, comment on the video, the YouTube channel, or on the Facebook page. We'd love to talk to you. So we're here Monday through Friday at Rural Community Solutions TV on our YouTube channel, Rural Community Solutions on our Facebook page, or you can catch us on our podcast at anchor.fm/Frank Spillers. Think like an entrepreneur, become a spark plug. And you too can become an entrepreneurial wealth building community.
Thanks so much for joining us. Have a fabulous weekend. If you're in the Midwest, stay warm. We are so glad you've joined us. Thanks so much.
See you on Monday.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.